Thank you for tuning in to All Things Real Estate. Once again, here are your hosts, Brad Avergon and Gary Kelly.
Welcome back to All Things Real Estate. We're here with Brad Avergon talking about the experts that you need on your team as you are going through and buying a house. And we, in the first segment, we talked about the importance of legal. How about the importance of someone that can help you with some money?
Well, full disclosure, I'm jaded in this area, but yeah, I think that's super important. It's always amazing to me how people make decisions on where they're going to go for their mortgage. And I understand in this day and age of the internet, a lot of people start their shopping process. They're going to go online, they're going to find something, and they're going to go from there. But it's like the Amazon. I'm going to just use the Amazon. Like if I order it, it will show up a day later. That's the mindset. So if I order my mortgage, it will show up the day later. And there's so much more that's involved in a mortgage, and on both internally.
There are some companies that are advertising that right now, Brad.
What's that?
There are some companies that are advertising one-day mortgages.
I'm absolutely familiar with that, but I also know that as is true with advertising, okay, that is a marketing line, because there's certain disclosure rules that have to happen. Buyers have to get their disclosures 3 days in advance to be able to review them. It's not like you can go online and get your mortgage. It just that legally and compliantly, it doesn't work. There's steps that all lenders have to do: disclose the application, get those things, if there's an appraisal, they got to get that. There has to be a title that has to be an acceptable title. We have to get those. And then the buyers are required to receive what's called the initial CD, closing disclosure, 3 days prior to closing. So at a minimum, you're talking about a week to 2 weeks to be able to do something to just make it work, just the sheer mechanics of it. But I think, aside from that, I think it's so important to have a relationship. And I know that it's a little bit different. Like, again, using technology, people communicate via text, they communicate via email, they communicate through the web, the whole thing. I get that. But there's so much money at stake. So I'm going to use the Amazon analogy again. It's not like you're buying a bird feeder, right? And if it stinks, you can return it, whatever. You're putting 5% of the purchase price, which on a $500,000 home is $25,000. That's a big bird feeder. That's a lot of money to put at risk and not have.
Hold on, is it a big bird feeder or is it a big bird feeder?
Both, I guess, right? That's a lot of money to put at risk, and so that's the first aspect. The second aspect is having that relationship, having that person that you can call during the night or a weekend and be able to say, what's going on? I'm worried about this. What's going on? I've got this decision to make. What do I do? I think that's very, very, very important. And then the other side of it is, what's the experience level of the person like myself? How long have they been doing it? Is they just got into the business and you're relying on that person to get you this money at the end game to help you cross the finish line? Or have they been doing it a while, and are they experienced, they know what they're doing, and they know how to guide you through the process?
So let me kick the one-day mortgage thing just for a second. There are people that are out advertising that. And when you talk to those folks, they will kind of wink and say, it's a great marketing line, isn't it? But you can't, there are things you can do in advance to accelerate the process. Like provide all the documents to the mortgage company. Let them go through and underwrite the purchase, but they can't underwrite it without having an appraisal on the property. And Brad, in your experience, how long does it take to get an appraisal done?
So it varies depending on the amount of volume that's going on. But right now, we can get an appraisal done, and usually within a week if we have to, but usually within 2 weeks for sure.
So that's another element that takes time. For some reason, they still go out and do the mortgage plot plan. And they sit there and they say, oh, that shed, it's an encumbrance on this lot. No, yeah, okay. And I'm making light of it, but you want to know that stuff before you consummate the deal. Right. It takes time for people to go out and do that stuff.
Yeah. there's a lot, and it's funny. There's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that consumers don't understand. And a lot of times they get frustrated and they get impatient. I remember a number of years ago, I had a client and who we were doing a condo purchase for. I actually inherited the deal from another loan officer, and we were helping the client. And I walked into the deal. It was a new construction condo complex, and it turns out that the condominium documents had been recorded by the seller's attorney erroneously. The phases were not done correctly. And had we closed on that condo, it would have been a nightmare for that client to sell it. And they were like, we got to get in. We want to get. I said, I understand. I get where you're coming from. Like, we want to close right away. We want to get this done. I said, I get that. But you need to understand that if we record these documents the way they are, when you go to sell this unit, you're going to have a nightmare on your hands. So we need to get the seller to fix this correctly. And they were frustrated. They were frustrated with it, but like, this should be done. I hear you, but you need to do this right. And so there's this impatience, I get the question very often, Gary, especially with first-time home buyers who are renting right now. They'll say, okay, I've applied for my mortgage. Can I give my notice? We had a situation recently with a condo, and I said, it's not just about you. You look great on paper, but this condo project has to have budget. It has to, the budget has to meet certain requirements. The condo docs have to meet certain requirements. The insurance has to meet certain requirements. And, I said, I cannot recommend you give your notice to save yourself a couple of months rent. And I'm not minimizing the cost of rent, but you won't have a place to live if this has. So you need to understand that going into it. So, sometimes I have to be that kind of heavy voice in there, but at least they know the truth and then say, okay, now they make their own decisions.
I think that's a challenge sometimes. And I completely and totally respect the perspective you're taking. Sometimes people will say, oh, you were negative on that house. No, I wasn't negative on the house. I was telling you what I saw. It's up to you to make the ultimate decision on what to do. I remember one buyer in particular. He's at the forefront of my mind. He wanted to buy this house, and he had had a home inspection done, and the home inspector wasn't bothered by the fact that the roof across the top of the building was not like this, that the roof sagged. And this was a house that wasn't that old. So I said to the buyer, we need to have someone else take a look at this. He says, I already had my home inspector look at it. So I brought out a licensed mass certified building official, and he looked at it and said, that building is being forced apart, and the roof is where you're seeing it, but that's going on in the building. The buyer was not happy with me. He says, you're ruining my deal. Well, actually, I'm not trying to ruin your deal. I'm trying to make sure you don't hate me long afterwards as the roof continues to sag because the walls of the house are being pushed out. And long story short, that buyer found another house and it was great and life went on. But sometimes you have to deliver those tough messages, and it's not you being mean to them. It's you being honest with the situation, and ultimately they have to make the decision on what they do.
Correct. And sometimes actually it's not even up to them. And I have to deliver that news sometimes. Sometimes they'll say, well, I want to buy this anyway. I love this place. This is going to be a great place. I want to buy it anyway. And I have to say, well, guess what? Since you don't not showing up with a bag full of cash, the bank is not going to finance this property the way it is because it's not a good decision. There's a problem here. And I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'll just use the same analogy with the condo docs. If those condo docs are not corrected, we do not want to be responsible for that. We do not want to be in a position where we've got to correct that problem, because what's happening is you're showing up with maybe 5, 10, 15, or 20%. The bank is showing up with 80% of the money. So we're kind of looking over your shoulder to make sure that that's correct. Everything's just as it needs to be.
Well, I look at that and say, the thing I tell my clients is the bank really doesn't want to give you money, and it's a game. And as a result, you have to, whatever they throw up an objection, you have to work to knock it down. And it's just the bank's trying to mitigate their own risk on behalf of the client. But it does get frustrating for the clients at times. I remember one time having a client that it was actually a referral from a Fairway loan officer. And they had looked at a house and they wanted to buy this house. And I'm going to pay whatever it takes to get this house. And I said, I respect that you like the house. That's good. You're not going to pay whatever. Okay. Because you have to understand that sometimes a house will sell for more than it's worth. Then you have an appraisal issue and you're going to end up having to pay the difference in the appraisal amount. And are you in a position to do that? Does that make good financial sense? Again, playing it's somewhere between, I'm going to say being, fatherly and helpful and just being, not a full on arse, but being someone who says, listen, this is really how you have to look at this. And it's a fine line sometimes that you walk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, again, that's where building that team of experts, being able to kind of deliver that news, give the best guidance and advice, and then letting the client, make their decisions accordingly. I think that's where you want that team. And again, that whole communication, that's the other part. You want to communicate with the other parties. If there's something that's showing up in the condo docs, it's my obligation to communicate that to the buyer agent, let them know what's going on because they're experienced professional as well. And also let the attorney go on. At the end of the day, I always say this to my clients. I said, there's always another house. If this one isn't going to work out, there's always another house, but we need to protect your deposit. That's really, really important. We can't just throw that to the wind because to try to come up with that money again would be difficult. So that's part of our obligation that I think sometimes buyers don't understand.
Brad, as we bring this show to a close, how would someone reach you?
Best way to reach me, Gary, is via my cell phone, which is 978-375-5531, or via my email, which is brad@bradavergon.com. And Gary, how do they reach you?
I'm Gary at movewithgary.com. And my phone number is 508-733-6005. Brad, excellent show. I appreciate your help in participating in these. Thanks again to David Jaime for underwriting the first half of the show. Have a great month, folks.
Be well, Gary.
Once again, thank you for watching All Things Real Estate. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Brad or Gary.